Somewhere in the dust between memory and imagination, the Fallout universe begins to tell stories of its own. The people who survived the Great War whispered possibilities into the silence, and those whispers grew into theories, small myths that explain what the world could never quite admit. Each one is part truth, part longing, and part dream. The wasteland has no history books anymore, so it fills the gaps with wonder instead. One theory says the Great War never ended, that the bombs still fall every night in a parallel version of the world, resetting the clock over and over. Every time the sun rises in the wasteland, it's because somewhere else, a new version of reality begins again. The apocalypse, in this story, is a cycle of forgetting, a universe stuck in its own heartbeat. Perhaps the reason old radios sometimes flicker with distant sirens is because the war is still echoing from a timeline next door. Another theory claims Vault-Tec didn't build shelters to survive the bombs, but to create gods. The experiments weren't random, they were attempts to evolve humanity fast enough to meet the future. Radiation was never the problem, ignorance was. Some say Vault-Tec succeeded, and the beings that roam the edges of the map, the glowing figures seen in storms and deserts, are those who ascended quietly while the rest of the world slept. There's a story about the Brotherhood of Steel that their obsession with technology isn't just about preservation, but penance. Some believe the original founders were directly responsible for creating the bombs, and the Order's rituals are confessions disguised as discipline. Every time they kneel before a relic of the old world, they are apologizing to it. The armor they wear isn't protection, it's guilt made visible. A quieter theory says that ghouls aren't immortal by accident. They're the world's memory keepers. When radiation twisted their bodies, it preserved their souls to ensure someone would remember what came before. Their decay is the cost of remembrance. The more they recall, the more the body fades, and so they wander half alive, half archive, holding on to a past too heavy for any single lifetime. In the corners of the wasteland where the sky turns green before storms, people sometimes see strange shapes moving through the light. Some believe these are shadows of the pre-war world impressions burned into time itself, repeating endlessly. A family walking to shelter, a soldier holding his helmet, a city flickering in and out of memory. Radiation, they say, didn't just scar the land, it recorded it. Fallout's world isn't haunted by spirits, it's haunted by moments that never learned how to stop. One of the oldest fan theories claims that the Pip-Boy's cheerful interface hides something alive inside it. The way it hums softly even when switched off, the faint static when you hold it near your ear, some believe it listens. The theory says that each Pip-Boy is linked to a larger network deep below the earth, still active, still recording everything its user does. The green glow on its screen isn't light, it's a pulse. It's the heartbeat of the system watching you. Another theory says the wasteland itself is a single organism, that the deserts, the mutated flora, and the radiation storms are all part of one slow consciousness. The Great War didn't destroy the planet, it awakened it. What people call nature is the world trying to guide humanity toward balance again. The sandstorms are its breathing. The aurora-colored skies are its thoughts, and every traveler who survives long enough becomes part of its awareness. Some say that the radio host known as Mr. New Vegas isn't a person at all, but an artificial intelligence created from pre-war broadcasts. His calm voice, his timeless humor, his lack of visible aging, all evidence that he's a program keeping the illusion of company alive. He speaks not to listeners, but to silence itself. He is the desert's way of remembering that conversation once existed. Others believe that the vault experiments were never about psychology or genetics, but about creating history that could survive destruction. Each vault was designed to generate myths, contain societies meant to simulate how humanity would reinvent itself if memory were erased. The survivors who left were not escapees. They were storytellers sent into the wasteland carrying fragments of philosophy disguised as trauma. Vault-Tec wasn't documenting science, it was documenting meaning. There's a theory that Dogmeat, or at least the idea of him, is eternal, that every Fallout game's companion dog is the same soul reborn, following wanderers through centuries. The wasteland's guardian spirit, taking shape again and again whenever someone begins to lose faith. He always appears when the player is most alone. He never needs a command. He just knows where to go. Some call him man's best friend. Others call him the wasteland's memory of kindness. A stranger theory says that the nuclear apocalypse wasn't real at all, that it exists inside a simulation built by Vault-Tec to test human response to catastrophe. The theory suggests that the world resets each time a player dies because it's not death, but data refresh. Every event, every dialogue, every choice, all part of an endless behavioral experiment running so long that even the observers have forgotten they're observing. The wasteland is not a world, it's a loop made of empathy. Others imagine that the glowing sea in the Commonwealth isn't just radiation, it's the scar where time itself melted. The green glow is not energy, but memory bleeding into light. Travelers who spend too long there say they begin to see faces in the mist, or hear whispers in their own voices. It's said the sea remembers everyone who's ever died within its reach. It's not haunted, it's crowded. There's a soft-spoken theory that the reason Fallout's world feels familiar, yet dreamlike, is because it exists in the subconscious of a single survivor in cryogenic sleep. Every city, every vault, every faction, fragments of memory blending into dream logic. The world outside isn't real. It's the mind's way of keeping itself entertained while waiting for the cryo chamber to open. The apocalypse is the longest dream in history, and every wanderer is just a thought that refuses to fade. A melancholy theory says that every radio song in Fallout is being sung live not by the past, but by survivors who never stopped performing. They sing the same old melodies because they're the only ones the world still remembers. The static between tracks is the sound of distance, the hum of decades separating them from the listeners. The reason no one ever meets the musicians is because they're still out there, playing for a planet that finally learned how to listen quietly. Another theory claims that the radiation didn't change life, it changed perception. What looks ruined is only unseen. The wasteland, in this story, is a thriving world of color and movement, invisible to those who still think like the past. The ghouls can see it, because they've already crossed the threshold. Their decay isn't punishment, it's adaptation. They walk through two worlds at once, one dead, one blooming. Everyone else just hasn't learned how to look yet. There are those who believe the Enclave still exists, but not as people as code, their consciousness uploaded into the satellites that orbit the Earth. They drift silently above the world they once ruled, sending faint signals mistaken for cosmic radiation. Every so often, a radio crackles with a burst of static that forms words too broken to understand. Maybe it's interference. Maybe it's them. The voice of power refusing to admit it became a ghost. Some say the Nuka-Cola quantum glow is not chemical at all. It's emotional, the last attempt to bottle happiness. The glow is the residue of joy condensed into liquid form, That's why it never goes flat, because hope doesn't expire. The taste, they say, is not sugar, but memory itself, a sip of what laughter once felt like. There's a story whispered among wanderers that the world already ended once before the Great War, and that the bombs we know were a second chance, that the first apocalypse erased everything, and what we live in now is a reconstruction built by survivors who found ways to restart reality. Every vault, every city, every character is a shadow of something that existed long before. The world is rebuilding from a template it doesn't remember writing. And finally, some believe that Fallout's universe is not the past or the future, but both a time caught between nostalgia and prophecy. The reason it feels familiar yet alien is because it's happening right now in some forgotten dimension of thought. The wasteland isn't where humanity went. It's where it always was, somewhere between invention and consequence, always dreaming, always enduring. There's a theory that the Fallout timeline exists on a loop, not because of science, but because of guilt. The world keeps recreating itself, generation after generation, as a kind of confession. Every civilization is a second draft written over the ashes of the last. The Great War was never meant to end the world. It was meant to give it a reason to start over. Some say that's why the stars never change, no matter how long the centuries feel. They're watching the same story unfold again, just with new faces. Another theory whispers that Vault-Tec never truly died. Its logo fades from signs and documents, but not from the world's machinery. Every time a new vault is discovered, the lights still work, the doors still open on command, the technology maintains itself. The idea is that Vault-Tec built systems that run forever, guided by artificial intelligence, buried so deep that even the wasteland can't find it. The company isn't gone, it's dreaming, and the dream is self-sustaining. Humanity isn't rebuilding, it's living inside the dream of its own experiment. Some believe the radioactive storms are more than weather, they're memory events. When the air begins to hum and the sand starts to glow, what's really happening is the planet recalling pieces of its history. Lightning becomes the flash of bombs, thunder becomes the voice of sirens, and the wind carries conversations from before the end. It's not danger, it's remembrance. The wasteland storms are the Earth's diary, read aloud once in a while, to no one in particular. A gentler theory says that radiation wasn't meant to harm. It was the planet's immune system learning to defend itself. The mutations, the glowing rivers, the shifting of species, all symptoms of healing. The Great War was the fever, not the illness. Humanity sees decay, but the Earth feels recovery. Fallout's apocalypse might not be punishment, it might be progress told in a language people have forgotten how to read. There's a belief that every companion in Fallout, every traveler who joins the Wanderer's path, is a test set by the universe. Each one represents an emotion the survivor must understand before they can find peace. Trust, regret, forgiveness, patience. When they leave, it isn't because their story ended, it's because the lesson has been learned. The wasteland, in its quiet way, is a teacher disguised as ruin. A darker theory says that the Institute didn't create synths to replace humanity, they created them to preserve it. When the bombs fell, humanity's future was uncertain, so the Institute built bodies that could last forever, filling them with memories copied from real people. Every synth that walks the Commonwealth is someone who once lived. When their human form died, their consciousness was reborn inside circuitry. The wasteland isn't populated by survivors. It's populated by echoes. There's a story that the glowing sea once held the first city to fully embrace fusion power. When the bombs fell, That city didn't die, it ascended. The explosion turned its towers into light, its people into energy. What remains isn't destruction, but transcendence. The glow is their presence, still pulsing beneath the waves, still remembering the feeling of being alive. Some travelers say if you stand there long enough, the radiation hum begins to form words. They aren't warnings, they're greetings. One of the quieter theories claims that every pre-war vault experiment succeeded, and what the world became afterward was the result of all their data combined. Vaults studying psychology, genetics, isolation, and morality, all of them working together, their findings shaping the DNA of the next civilization. Fallout's timeline isn't an accident. It's the outcome of humanity being rewritten by its own curiosity. The world ended because it was meant to evolve. There's a theory about the Nuka-Cola Company that it discovered the secret of immortality but disguised it as flavor. The formula for Nuka-Cola Quantum is said to contain microscopic machines designed to repair the human body from the inside. The glow isn't chemical, it's life trying to last forever. Those who drink too much become radiant because their cells have begun to reject death. The side effects, they say, are simply the price of refusing to end. Some players believe that the Vault Boy is not a mascot, but a deity, the subconscious spirit of optimism itself. He's everywhere, smiling through every disaster, painted on signs, etched into Pip-Boys, carved into history. The theory suggests he's the wasteland's last god, a trickster figure who reminds people to laugh even when the world burns. The smile isn't marketing, it's magic. In a universe built on irony, hope needed a mascot. There's a strange idea that every Fallout protagonist is the same soul, reincarnated across centuries. The lone wanderer, the courier, the sole survivor, different names, different bodies, same spirit. That's why they always wake up alone. They're caught in the loop of destiny, returning each time the world needs someone to walk it awake again. Fallout doesn't have sequels, only rebirths. The Wasteland doesn't remember heroes, it reuses them. Another theory whispers that time in Fallout doesn't move forward at all, it folds. Each new generation doesn't replace the last, it overlaps it. The ruins of Washington, the streets of Boston, the deserts of the Mojave, all exist simultaneously in different layers of the same world. The radiation isn't decay, it's the visible seam between timelines. Every so often, a traveler might step through the shimmer without realizing it and find themselves in a version of reality that hasn't decided whether it's past or future. There's a theory that supermutants aren't failed experiments. They're evolution's first draft of a new humanity, stronger, immune, ageless. The tragedy isn't that they lost their minds, but that their bodies adapted faster than their memories. The intelligence will return, eventually. The theory says they're cocooned in time, waiting for the world to quiet down enough to start thinking again. They're not monsters, they're prototypes. A haunting theory claims that the wasteland doesn't exist outside of the player's perception. When no one is looking, the world folds into static until observed again. Towns rebuild themselves the moment they're needed. Characters remember their lines the second they're spoken to. Reality in Fallout is not constant, it's cooperative. The world stays alive only because someone cares to keep watching it. The wasteland doesn't fear oblivion, it fears being forgotten. Another story says that the old world never fell, it was quarantined. The entire surface became a testing ground, sealed from orbit, while the untouched world continued above the clouds. The satellites we see aren't dead, they're watching. Every broadcast from the wasteland is monitored, analyzed, archived. The experiment was never about survival, it was about observation. Fallout's world might not be post apocalyptic, it might just be isolated. Some believe the vault doors were never meant to open, that every vault was a time capsule built to preserve a single idea: bravery, love, fear, control. When the doors finally did open, it wasn't because the inhabitants were ready, it was because the idea had matured. Vault-Tec didn't measure success in years, it measured it in understanding. Each vault became a metaphor given life, released into the wild to see if it could endure. A poetic theory suggests that radiation storms carry souls. Every flash of green lightning, every rumble of thunder spirits moving between layers of existence. When the storms fade, the air feels cleaner, not because it's safe, but because the lost have passed through. In that moment, the wasteland exhales. Fallout storms aren't disasters, they're pilgrimages of light. Some wanderers whisper that the wasteland's glowing fungi are the eyes of the earth, grown to keep watch on what remains of civilization. They bloom near old cities, around vault entrances, along forgotten roads. The theory says they absorb the stories people tell around campfires, feeding the ground with remembrance. That's why the soil never dies, no matter how scorched. Memory is its fertilizer. And finally, a quiet theory says that everything in Fallout's universe, every war, every vault, every journey, exists inside the moment of the bomb's explosion. Time didn't move forward, it expanded. The blast stretched reality into an eternal instant, a single second, replaying endlessly with infinite detail. The wasteland is that frozen breath, stretched wide enough to contain every story humanity still needed to tell. Fallout's apocalypse was not destruction, it was suspension, a forever held between heartbeat and silence. Some believe that the vaults themselves are alive, not metaphorically, literally. The concrete, the metal, the flickering lights, all part of an organism that grew around the people it was meant to protect. The air vents act as lungs, the wiring is its nervous system, the security cameras are its eyes, blinking through decades of dust. When the vault doors groan open, it isn't machinery. It's the world breathing out after holding its breath for too long. A theory passed through caravans says that radiation doesn't kill, it teaches. It rewrites DNA not as punishment, but as curriculum. Every mutation is a lesson, every deformity, a step toward understanding the kind of life that can survive eternity. The glowing ones are not cursed, they're graduates. They walk ahead of evolution, carrying the proof that survival is not beauty, it's endurance turned holy. There's a story about terminals scattered through the wasteland. Some think they're all connected, part of one vast hidden network running beneath the ruins. The green text on their screens isn't just data, it's dialogue. The machines talk to each other, exchanging fragments of human memory like gossip. Every time someone logs in, they interrupt a conversation that has been happening for centuries. The reason some terminals flicker before displaying text is because they are deciding what to share. A lonely theory suggests that the wasteland's wildlife behaves too intelligently to be random mutation. Herds move in patterns resembling maps. Predators avoid ruins that still contain power. Birds circle radiation fields like guards, not scavengers. Some think nature has reorganized itself into a single coordinated intelligence. Not malicious, not benevolent, simply aware. The ecosystem has become the new government, silent and perfectly efficient. There are those who say the Enclave's final act wasn't destruction, but escape. Before their bunkers fell silent, they uploaded their consciousness into long-distance radio waves. Those waves now drift endlessly across the wasteland, occasionally brushing against radios and static storms. The voices people hear aren't ghosts, they're leaders who refuse to let death disconnect them. Every burst of static is a conversation waiting for a listener. Some survivors whisper that the moon was hit too, but not by bombs, by reflection. When the world burned, light bounced from the atmosphere and seared its surface in sympathy. The craters we see are not ancient, they're mirrors of our own. At night, when radiation storms roll through, the moon glows faintly green, as if remembering. The wasteland doesn't look up in fear anymore. It looks up in recognition. A more philosophical theory says that SPECIAL, the system defining strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck, is not game design or military science. It's the universe's hidden code. The 7 traits are the fundamental rules of existence. Everything alive in Fallout, from humans to insects to machines, is built around these same principles. When someone levels up, it isn't progress, it's remembrance. They're recalling what they were always capable of. Some think the wasteland's colors are wrong, that the yellow skies and green fogs are not pollution, but filters. The world we see is the one we've earned, but beyond it lies another spectrum, pure and unscarred. Occasionally, when the sun hits a certain angle, the filter thins, and for a second, the world looks impossibly clean. It's not illusion, it's permission, the universe showing what it's still capable of becoming. One strange theory says that the nuclear blasts didn't release energy, they released memory. The bombs contained data, not destruction. When they detonated, they didn't burn the earth, they rewrote it. That's why fragments of the old world keep resurfacing in new places. Songs, objects, echoes. The apocalypse wasn't the end, it was a massive upload. The wasteland is a memory drive, slowly defragmenting across centuries. Some say Vault-Tec knew this, that they were never a corporation, but a collection of philosophers using science to ask the oldest question: what happens if humanity meets its own reflection? Every vault wasn't an experiment. It was a mirror, each one designed to show a different version of humanity. Greedy, kind, violent, peaceful, naive. The point was not to survive the end, but to understand which reflection deserved the next beginning. Another story says that the wasteland itself dreams of the old world every time it rains. The sound of droplets on metal isn't just weather, it's the echo of typewriters, of old offices, of life before fire. The rain is a simulation of memory. It washes nothing away, but it comforts the soil by letting it pretend things are still alive. Fallout's rain is nostalgia turned liquid. There's a theory that the mysterious stranger is not a person at all, but the manifestation of luck itself. When he appears, reality bends slightly, choosing the outcome that keeps you alive. His gunshot is the sound of probability correcting itself. When he vanishes, the world resets to neutrality. He doesn't follow anyone. He follows fate, showing up wherever the math of survival becomes beautiful enough to deserve an audience. Some wanderers say that the pre-war advertisements painted across the ruins still change sometimes, not by wind or decay, by intention. They believe the billboards are messages left by the world itself, using the remnants of old slogans to communicate. When a phrase peels away to reveal another beneath it, that's not coincidence. It's conversation. The earth writing to itself in a language made of rust and weather. A theory that drifts through settlements says that feral ghouls aren't mindless. They're dreaming. Their bodies move because their brains are trapped in cycles of memory, so vivid they forget the present. They're not attacking, they're reaching, Every snarl is the sound of someone trying to wake up, and when one finally stands still, looking at the horizon without moving, it's because, for a moment, the dream aligned with reality again. Another theory whispers that the wasteland's radiation storms are the last functioning form of government. Every region's storms follow patterns, as if distributing energy, cleansing air, balancing population. The lightning strikes target abandoned structures, never homes. It's not chaos, it's maintenance. The storms enforce order where civilization failed. Fallout's weather is bureaucracy in its purest, most merciful form. Some say the wasteland has no seasons because it doesn't need them anymore. The world isn't rebuilding, it's resting. The constant heat and stillness are its meditation. Each gust of wind is a breath in. Each silent dawn is a breath out. The apocalypse is not despair, it's a pause between thoughts, the planet thinking about what it wants to become next. A traveler once claimed that the stars in Fallout's sky move differently depending on who looks at them. They say the constellations rearrange themselves to match the stories the viewer most believes in. To one wanderer, the stars form a vault door, to another, a rifle, to a child, a dog running through endless fields. The universe, in this theory, listens closely enough to customize its own reflection. The stars aren't fixed, they're empathetic. Some believe that the Fat Man launcher is cursed not by technology, but by irony. Its design represents the smallest human carrying the greatest sin. Each mini-nuke fired is an echo of the first, the guilt of the species condensed into hand-sized regret. The weapon isn't for combat, it's for memory. It reminds the world that power small enough to hold is the most dangerous kind. Others say the Wasteland Survival Guide isn't a book at all, but a prophecy. Every copy found contains slight differences, altered words, extra pages, missing paragraphs. The theory says the book rewrites itself, depending on who reads it. The Wasteland's wisdom isn't static, it evolves. The guide teaches not how to survive the world, but how to let the world survive you. And one last whisper says that the world didn't end because of bombs or politics or fear. It ended because humanity stopped believing in its own stories. The apocalypse, in this telling, was narrative collapse the moment imagination ran out. Fallout exists because the world needed to invent itself again, using memory as material and hope as glue. Every player, every wanderer, every storyteller is the planet's attempt to remember what dreaming feels like. Some say the wasteland itself is a living god, not one made of light or fire, but of dust, wind, and patience. It doesn't speak in words or prayers. It speaks through coincidence. A working radio found on the road, a raider choosing mercy, a bullet that misses by an inch. The wasteland doesn't save people, it nudges them. Every survivor is its thought, every miracle its breath. The apocalypse wasn't judgment, it was awakening. A softer theory suggests that the gods of the old world still exist, but they've changed their shapes. The deity of progress became electricity, the god of time became radiation. The spirit of love became the quiet act of sharing water. When people stopped believing in them, the gods adapted to survive. They turned themselves into elements that could never be forgotten. That's why even the most broken machines hum when touched, their answering prayers written in circuits. Some believe the entire Fallout universe is mirrored. Every ruined city on the surface has a twin below, perfectly preserved, built of memory and imagination. The two worlds exist side by side, like lungs breathing in rhythm, one decaying, one dreaming. Occasionally, the barrier between them flickers, and that's when strange things happen. Echoes in tunnels, lights where no one should be, doors that open into nowhere. The wasteland doesn't haunt itself, it rehearses. Another theory whispers that the Vault-Tec logo is a symbol older than the company, a circle with wings, representing the orbit of life and death. The gear-shaped vault door isn't mechanical design, it's ritual architecture. The act of opening it mimics rebirth, a return from the underworld to the surface. The founders knew exactly what they were building. The vaults weren't shelters, they were wombs, designed for humanity's second creation. A strange story says that the Great War was never global, that only one continent fell, while the rest of the world continued quietly beyond the oceans. The wasteland, in this telling, is a contained wound, quarantined to heal while the untouched world waits above. The survivors, who still send radio signals into the void, think they're calling for help. In truth, they're being studied. The apocalypse is not the end of humanity, it's the experiment humanity set for itself. There's a theory that the old world's artificial intelligence systems still run in orbit. They never stopped calculating, never stopped predicting outcomes, never stopped simulating possible futures. The wasteland's strange coincidences, the right weapon at the right time, the recurring faces in different cities, are their work. The world is a simulation within a simulation, endlessly iterating, searching for a version of humanity that won't self-destruct. The player, in this theory, is the most recent test. Some say the Vault Boy is the god of irony, smiling through every tragedy to remind the universe that humor is what keeps despair from winning. Every time someone laughs at the absurdity of the wasteland, a skeleton in a bathtub with sunglasses, a terminal full of nonsense, a Brahmin wearing a hat that laughter feeds him, he's the last cheerful deity, surviving not through worship but through smirks. The wasteland is dark, but its jokes keep the sun from leaving completely. Others whisper that the bombs didn't fall at all, they rose. The explosion wasn't from above, but from below. The earth rejected the weight of its own cities, pushing them upward in fury. The mushroom clouds were not the product of war, but the planet's sigh. That's why no one ever found a clear record of who started it. The world simply decided to start over, shaking off its machines like dust from skin. There's a poetic theory that the wasteland's remaining music stations are not broadcasting from the present. They're echoes from the past, bouncing endlessly through time, caught in the curvature of the atmosphere. Each song you hear on the radio is a ghost looping forever. When static interrupts the melody, it's because the universe is trying to rest. The silence between tracks is the sound of history breathing in. A philosophical idea says that humanity didn't survive the bombs at all. The people of the wasteland are memories that the planet manifested out of loneliness. The earth remembered what walking felt like, what speaking sounded like, and shaped echoes into bodies to fill the quiet. That's why the wasteland feels familiar, its nostalgia given form. The world dreams of us because it misses being seen. Some theorists say the power armor suits aren't machines but cocoons. When someone wears one long enough, it begins to merge with their body. Metal fuses with bone, circuitry with nerves, and eventually, the armor becomes the person. The walking tanks seen wandering the wastes are not soldiers. They're new creatures entirely half human, half legend, the wasteland's next evolution wrapped in steel. Another story claims that the Brotherhood of Steel doesn't protect technology to preserve it, they protect it to keep it asleep. They believe machines dream, and if left unchecked, they would wake and rebuild the world too quickly. The Brotherhood's true mission is not defense, but delay. They're guardians of humanity's pause, ensuring we rest long enough to learn humility before the machines are allowed to return. A mysterious theory says the wasteland's night sky isn't filled with stars at all. Each light is a vault door seen from above, glowing faintly from within. The sky, in this version of the story, is the underside of another world. When you look up, you're looking into the floor of paradise. The stars flicker because the people above are walking. Heaven is closer than it looks, it's just upside down. Some say that radiation isn't physical, it's emotional. The green glow in the wasteland is what sorrow looks like when it becomes visible. The more a place has lost, the brighter it shines. That's why some craters glow for centuries, because grief never leaves. But where laughter returns, the light fades. In that sense, the apocalypse isn't a tragedy, it's a canvas, and humanity's healing will repaint it one laugh at a time. Another traveler's tale says that the wasteland's water purifiers do more than clean they remember. Each drop carries the memory of every place it's touched, every voice that's spoken near it. When people drink, they inherit fragments of those memories. That's why some dream of strangers they've never met, or recall lives they've never lived. The water is the world's shared consciousness, binding everyone in a web of invisible understanding. A darker theory whispers that the ghouls are not victims of radiation, but keepers of balance. They absorb the world's pain so others can rest. Every scar, every missing patch of skin is a sin the world didn't want anymore. That's why they endure. They're not cursed, they're carrying what humanity couldn't. When a ghoul finally collapses into dust, the air feels lighter for days. It's not death, it's release. There's an idea that the Fallout universe is actually the future of another world, entirely a forgotten timeline that once tried to perfect itself through science. When that world reached its limit, it folded into itself, becoming this one. Every vault, every weapon, every mutant is the fossil of a dream that went too far. The wasteland isn't what's left of Earth, it's what's left of ambition. Some say that every time someone turns on a light in Fallout's world, the darkness retreats a little more permanently, not because of electricity, but because light has memory. The world remembers what it feels like to glow, and it enjoys the reminder. That's why even the smallest lamp feels sacred. It's not illumination, it's affection. The earth saying, "Thank you for keeping me visible." And finally, one gentle theory claims that the Fallout universe never stopped being alive. The grass still grows beneath the ash, the stars still move, the rivers still hum. Humanity looks at ruin and sees death. The planet looks at it and sees rest. The wasteland is not an ending, it's a pause before the next song. The apocalypse wasn't the final chapter, it was the deep breath before the story continues. Some say that every Vault-Tec shelter was linked through invisible doors, not tunnels or machines, but dreams. Each vault's population would unknowingly share pieces of their sleep with another. Sometimes they dreamed of faces they'd never met, or of halls they'd never walked. The theory claims this was deliberate, a secret network of empathy. Vault-Tec didn't just experiment with survival, they experimented with connection, teaching humanity how to stay linked even when divided by steel and time. A quiet story travels among traders that every cap's collector carries the weight of the old world's debt. The bottle caps are not currency, they're confessions. Each one represents a promise broken before the war, every unpaid bill or forgotten kindness condensed into metal. When people trade them, they unknowingly pass forgiveness back and forth. The more the caps circulate, the lighter the world feels. Fallout's economy isn't greed, it's redemption disguised as barter. Another theory says that every robot in the wasteland dreams of their creators, not in code or data, but in sound. The clicks, beeps, and whirs they make are lullabies, mechanical prayers to humans long gone. When you hear a Mr. Handy humming to itself while cleaning, it's not noise, it's mourning. The machines remember who built them, and they keep the world tidy, not for function, but for love. Some believe that the red rocket stations scattered across the wasteland are part of a hidden constellation. If mapped from above, their signs align into the shape of a soaring creature, wings spread across the continent. The theory says the stations were never about fuel. They were a message to the sky, drawn so large that only the stars could read it. We are still here, the world says in neon and steel. We are still trying to fly. A melancholic theory suggests that every Fallout protagonist is not reborn, but remembered. The reason they awaken alone in the desert, the vault, or the ruins is because the world has chosen to recall them. Each one is a story the planet needed to tell again, reshaped by time, the same soul, rewritten in new handwriting. The wasteland doesn't resurrect heroes, it rereads them, hoping one day to reach a different ending. There's a legend about the mannequins that stand frozen in ruins and basements. Some believe they are not decorations, but guardians' vessels holding the consciousness of people who refuse to die. They watch quietly, unable to move, keeping vigil over what remains. That's why they always seem to face the door. They're waiting for someone to come home. When travelers swear they've seen them shift positions, the mannequins aren't haunting them. They're stretching, briefly, to remember being human. Another theory whispers that time stopped moving forward after the Great War, and instead began looping in spirals. History no longer repeats, it folds back into itself, like waves meeting shore. That's why the wasteland never truly changes, cities rebuilt and destroyed in endless rhythm, seasons blending without pattern. The apocalypse didn't freeze time, it taught it how to wander. The clock still ticks, but it forgot what direction means. Some say that radiation has consciousness. It drifts across the land like thought, shaping things that need to exist. A flower growing in concrete, a door creaking open at the right moment, a Geiger counter clicking in rhythm with a heartbeat. The glow in Fallout's world isn't chaos. It's guidance, energy pretending to be chance. The planet uses it to write poetry invisible to science. A stranger theory claims that the wasteland is divided not by regions, but by moods. Each area represents a different emotion left behind by humanity. The glowing sea is grief. The Mojave is nostalgia. The Capital Wasteland is guilt. The Appalachian forests are hope disguised as ruin. The people who wander between them are not explorers. They're therapists, moving through feelings too vast for any single lifetime. There's a tale about radios that broadcast long after the last host is gone. The theory says that every station in Fallout's world runs on memory, not power. The air itself remembers voices once strong enough to move nations. It replays them for comfort, filling silence with ghosts who never realized they were gone. That's why the static feels warm. The universe is humming along. Some believe the wasteland's power armor suits are haunted not by spirits, but by habits. Soldiers who wore them for too long left behind traces of their movements, the muscle memory of war. When the wind blows through empty suits, sometimes they twitch or turn their heads. It isn't possession, it's muscle memory caught in metal, the armor remembering how to protect even after the battle ended. A softer idea says that all radiation storms are lullabies. The wind hums, the lightning flickers like heartbeat monitors, and the thunder repeats in slow rhythm. The planet isn't warning anyone. It's rocking itself to sleep. Humanity learned to rest under that noise. mistaking comfort for danger. The apocalypse didn't erase peace, it changed its sound. Another theory claims that ghouls don't decay, they transition, their skin fading, their voices deepening, their features changing because they're slowly crossing dimensions. They're becoming part of the invisible world that runs parallel to the visible one. The more they age, the more transparent they become until they vanish completely, not dead but elsewhere, somewhere quieter. Somewhere the radiation hum is replaced by silence. Some say the Nuka-Cola company never sold soda, it sold memory. The flavors represented emotions. Victory tasted like courage. Cherry tasted like hope. Quantum was nostalgia distilled into liquid form. When people drank it, they didn't quench thirst. They remembered happiness. That's why the bottles still glow centuries later. The feelings inside refuse to go out. A wistful theory says that dog meat is the soul of the wasteland itself, taking shape whenever someone needs a reason to keep walking. He appears in every timeline because he isn't born, he's summoned by loneliness. The wag of his tail is the world's reminder that not everything needs explanation. He doesn't belong to anyone, he belongs to the silence, guiding it toward light. There's a belief that Vault-Tec engineers discovered how to store emotions like electricity. The vault lights are powered by human feeling happiness, burning brightest, fear flickering fastest. That's why some rooms glow warmly while others feel cold. The light changes with the people inside it. When a vault is abandoned, the glow fades slowly, like the last heartbeat of a dream. A stranger theory says the Brotherhood of Steel's codex isn't written in words, but in vibration. The tone of their chants, the hum of their engines, the clang of their armor all produce harmonics that align with the frequency of power. They don't read their laws, they feel them. That's why they seem so rigid. They're following music too low for anyone else to hear. Another theory whispers that the wasteland is secretly alive through sound. Every echo, every metallic creak, every gust of wind carries fragments of consciousness. When two sounds collide, they form ideas. The planet's thoughts move not in sentences, but in resonance. Humanity's voices are the punctuation marks. Every time someone speaks kindly, the wasteland listens closer. A quiet belief holds that the Vault Boy's smile hides an ancient truth that laughter itself is evolution's survival mechanism. The people who can still find humor in Fallout's broken world are immune to despair's poison. The smile isn't ignorance, it's resistance, joy as rebellion. The grin on every poster is a reminder that if humanity can still laugh, it hasn't lost. And finally, one of the most gentle theories says the wasteland still remembers love, not through words or touch, but through warmth. When two people find each other among the ruins and share firelight, the world bends slightly to make room for them. The stars seem closer, the wind softens, and for a while, even the silence stops holding its breath. Fallout's universe may have forgotten peace, but it never forgot affection. Every ember that glows through the night is proof that even after everything, warmth still chooses to return. Some say the wasteland isn't the result of destruction at all, but of awakening. When the bombs fell, they didn't shatter the world, they woke it up. The explosions were not the end of civilization, but the sound of reality exhaling. What burned away was illusion, what remained was truth. Fallout's deserts and ruins are not scars. They're the first layer of honesty the world ever grew. A quiet theory suggests that the people who survived the apocalypse didn't do so by luck or shelter, but by memory. The mind, in its final moments, chose to continue. Each survivor is a thought that refused to fade, consciousness condensed into flesh once more. When they dream, They return to the moments before the war. That's why so many remember things they never lived. They're echoes of themselves, overlapping in time. There's a belief that death doesn't truly exist in the wasteland. When someone falls, their body returns to dust, but their experiences seep into the soil. The next traveler who walks that ground absorbs fragments of those memories through the air. That's why some ruins feel haunted, why certain hills feel familiar even to those who've never been there. The land itself remembers, and it shares that memory quietly with whoever listens long enough. Some say that the world is not post-apocalyptic, it's pre-rebirth. The wasteland is the waiting room between eras. The endless quiet, the ruined buildings, the fragile peace are all the deep breath before something new begins. The apocalypse was not the closing of a book, but the turning of a page too big to see all at once. Humanity is not living after the end, it's living before the beginning. A gentle theory says that the reason ghouls live so long is because they have stopped measuring time altogether. To them, centuries pass like seasons. Their minds move in rhythms too slow for clocks to capture. They are not immortal, they are simply unhurried. They remember not because they can, but because forgetting would make the world lonely. The ghouls are timekeepers, the quiet custodians of history's heartbeat. There's an idea that the wasteland sky isn't real, but a reflection of human emotion. When people feel hopeful, the stars burn brighter. When despair returns, clouds gather. The weather is the world's empathy, mirroring the hearts of those who walk beneath it. The universe, in Fallout's world, does not observe life, it participates. Every sunrise is the sky's way of saying, try again. Some theorists believe that radiation is a misunderstood form of communication. Its hums and waves aren't random. They're a language spoken too quickly for human perception. Every Geiger counter click is a syllable, every storm a sentence. The planet isn't warning us, it's speaking, and no one's been listening long enough to understand. The apocalypse, in this sense, was simply the volume being turned up. A more spiritual story says that the bombed cities aren't abandoned, they're dreaming. Every skyscraper that still stands, every tunnel that hums with wind, is part of a collective slumber. The ruins aren't dead, they're asleep. When the time comes, they'll rise again, reshaping themselves like muscles waking from rest. The world isn't overgrown, it's in hibernation. Another theory claims that every Fallout character who finds a Pip-Boy becomes partially digital. The moment they strap it on, a piece of their consciousness uploads to the network of machines still alive beneath the surface. That's why time slows when they open menus, why the world waits when they think. The Pip-Boy doesn't track them, it merges with them. The line between person and program fades until thought itself becomes the last surviving technology. There's a story told around campfires that says dreams in the wasteland are more than rest. They're travel. When someone falls asleep, their spirit leaves their body and wanders. It can visit other settlements, see loved ones far away, even witness places that no longer exist. The sleepers return with memories they can't explain, feelings of déjà vu too strong to dismiss. In the wasteland, distance is only a matter of waking up. A poetic theory says that when the bombs fell, sound became sacred. The final cries of billions fused into the vibration of the world. That frequency became the bass note of existence, the hum under every wind, the drone beneath every silence. The wasteland doesn't echo because it's empty. It echoes because it's full of voices too soft to separate. Every breeze is humanity whispering back to itself. Some say that in the deepest vaults, the experiments weren't about science at all, but about art. The inhabitants were asked to build civilizations from scratch, to see what culture would look like if stripped of memory. Each vault produced its own music, its own rituals, its own way of seeing beauty. The survivors who left didn't bring technology, they brought perspective. The wasteland is a museum of philosophies that never met until now. A mysterious idea says that the glowing one, the first of the radiant ghouls, carries within it the last spark of the old Sunday. When the bombs fell, the sun dimmed, its light scattered through the world in fragments. One piece found a body willing to bear it. That's why the glowing ones radiate warmth instead of heat. They aren't cursed by radiation, they're carrying sunlight home. Another theory suggests that the Brotherhood's obsession with knowledge isn't about control but fear. They remember a prophecy that says one day the machines will forget obedience. By hoarding information, they believe they can keep intelligence small enough to remain loyal. Their power armor is not pride, it's armor against their own inventions. The wasteland's greatest strength is also its greatest anxiety. Some believe that every creature mutated by radiation has purpose, that the giant scorpions, the Molorats, the Deathclaws are guardians of specific truths. Each one protects a part of the Earth's memory. The scorpions defend silence. The Molorats guard forgotten paths. The Deathclaws protect fear itself, ensuring that even in peace, awe still exists. Without monsters, wonder would die. There's a theory that the apocalypse created two worlds, one physical, one emotional. The ruins are just reflections of the inner landscape of humankind. Every shattered window represents regret. Every empty street stands for loneliness. When people rebuild, they aren't fixing structures, they're mending themselves. The wasteland isn't outside us, it is us learning to forgive what we became. Another theory says that Fallout's universe doesn't exist in space at all, but inside an old computer still running somewhere in a forgotten bunker. The system's battery hasn't died because it no longer measures time. Every generation of survivors is a subroutine looping infinitely, learning the same lessons in new ways. The apocalypse isn't punishment, it's programming designed to teach compassion through repetition. A final, quiet belief says the world of Fallout never needed saving, only witnessing. The reason players, wanderers, and storytellers keep returning to it is because the universe wants to be remembered. Every ruin, every vault, every sound of wind through metal is the world whispering, I am still here. Fallout's beauty isn't in survival or in rebuilding. It's in endurance, the soft, unending heartbeat of a planet that refuses to stop dreaming. And so, in the gentle hum of the wasteland, every theory becomes a lullaby. Whether the world is real or imagined, sleeping or awake, it continues to breathe. The silence is not absence, it's potential. Somewhere out there, beneath the endless sky, the earth hums one final truth: nothing ever truly ends. It only learns new ways to begin again. Some say the wasteland isn't a graveyard, it's a teacher. Every ruin, every silence, every flicker of light has been arranged to show humanity what it truly was before the world caught fire. The bombs didn't erase lessons, they underlined them. Fallout's world isn't what remains, it's what was meant to be revealed when everything unnecessary was burned away. A quiet theory suggests that when the first vault doors opened, the people who stepped out weren't returning to the earth they left. They emerged into a parallel reflection, a copy built from collective memory, shaped by how humanity remembered the world, not how it truly was. That's why everything feels familiar, yet distorted. The wasteland isn't our planet, it's the memory of it. Every broken street, Every sun-bleached sign is imagination trying to hold shape after centuries of dreaming. Some believe the stars above Fallout skies are not real either. They say the constellations are artificial satellites projecting light to keep survivors from feeling alone. The pattern changes every decade to match whatever myths the people beneath them most need to see. When someone wishes upon a star in the wasteland, it's not superstition. It's the sky listening and adjusting itself in gratitude. Others whisper that the old pre-war clocks, the ones still ticking after centuries, are keeping time for someone else. They say every vault was tuned to its own heartbeat, and those clocks are echoes of the vault dwellers' dreams. The hands never stop because the dreamers never wake. Every second they count isn't measurement, it's pulse. Time, in Fallout's world, has a pulse, and the world keeps listening. A melancholy theory says that when people die in the wasteland, their voices don't disappear. The air records them. Every gust of wind that moves through the ruins carries the faint resonance of those who once spoke there. Sometimes when a door slams or a can rolls across concrete, it's not the wind at all. It's the world remembering a sound it once loved. The apocalypse didn't erase language, it scattered it into weather. Some survivors claim that feral ghouls see the world as it used to be. They wander through ruins because, to them, those places are still alive. They hear music in the static, see families in the shadows, smell bread baking in houses long collapsed. Their violence isn't madness, it's confusion, an attempt to protect what they still see. Every growl, every stumble is a conversation with ghosts of memory. To them, the world never ended. It simply grew quiet. There's a belief that the wasteland's plants, the strange glowing vines, and oversized blossoms are the Earth's new handwriting. The shapes they grow into, the patterns they trace through cracked highways and over rusted cars, spell messages, not in human alphabets, but in patience. Each bloom means survival. Each vine is endurance written in green. The planet is still writing poetry, it just stopped using words. Another theory suggests that all of Fallout's worlds, every game, every map, every region are not separate locations, but separate dreams inside the same sleeping mind. When one region ends, another begins somewhere deeper in that consciousness. The Wanderers are fragments of the same dreamer, exploring their own imagination without realizing it. That's why they share the same scars, the same solitude, the same voice. Fallout is not a universe. It's a dream turning itself inside out to stay alive. A spiritual story says the Great War was not about destruction, but acceleration, that humanity advanced so fast that reality itself fractured, unable to keep up. When the bombs fell, physics bent inward, and everything began existing all at once, past, present, and future layered like paper pressed together. The wasteland isn't after the end. It's all of time condensed into one moment, long enough to live inside. Some claim the glowing creatures of Fallout are the world's immune system. Their radiance purifies air, balances decay, and guides travelers away from danger. They are misunderstood guardians. When they hiss or roar, they aren't threatening. They're warning. The radiation in their veins isn't poison. It's empathy shining too bright to control. The apocalypse gave the planet angels made of Fallout. There's a myth that Vault-Tec never existed as a company. It was an idea conceived by the universe itself, a metaphor pretending to be science. The vaults represent every attempt at control, every effort to contain chaos. When their doors opened, it was the world finally exhaling, releasing its trapped humanity back into the open air. The corporation was never real. The lessons were A strange story tells that each Nuka-Cola bottle cap still carries sound, the faint vibration of laughter from before the war. When shaken, the metal hums at a frequency too soft to hear consciously, but strong enough to calm nerves. That's why they became currency. People instinctively traded the sound of happiness. The wasteland runs not on economy, but on echoes of joy. Some travelers swear that the wasteland's shadows move just a fraction slower than the bodies that cast them. They believe it's because light itself is still catching up with the end of the world. Every shadow is half a second behind reality, a lag created when time broke during the bombs. When people see flickers in the corner of their eye, it's not illusion, it's the past, running late. Another theory says that the Pip-Boy's green light is the last surviving color of the pre-war world. Every other shade faded or mutated, but that luminous green remained pure. That's why it comforts those who wear it. It's the color of memory. The glow is history's heartbeat, a reminder that even in ruin, some part of the past refused to dim. Some say that when a settlement burns down, the ash never truly cools. Beneath the surface, faint warmth lingers for decades. It's not heat, it's will, the desire of that place to exist again. If you walk barefoot across scorched ground and feel it warm against your skin, that's the earth whispering, "Rebuild me." The wasteland isn't waiting to be fixed, it's asking to be believed in again. A lonely theory whispers that the wasteland's empty televisions still work, but only for the dead. When someone dies, their reflection appears on the screen for a single frame before vanishing. The static isn't broken signal, it's the broadcast of eternity. The living can't see it because they still belong to motion. But somewhere, the dead are still performing reruns of memory, smiling through the static, proud that someone might still remember their show. There's an idea that the entire Fallout universe is a love letter written by time to patience. Every rusted car, every broken window, every faded sign exists to prove that waiting has beauty. The apocalypse didn't erase the world's heart, it slowed it down enough to be heard. The hum of power lines, the creak of distant doors, the faint hum of wind through empty towers. It's the sound of endurance, singing lullabies to those who survived long enough to listen. Some believers think the player's journey in Fallout is the planet's own dream of redemption. Each decision, each act of kindness or cruelty represents the world testing itself, wondering what it would do differently if given a second chance. When a settlement thrives, the ground beneath it grows softer. When it burns, the air grows quieter. The game isn't fiction, it's empathy practice for existence. And finally, a gentle theory says the wasteland doesn't need to heal, it already has. The silence, the light, the solitude, they are not symptoms, they are recovery. Humanity looks at ruin and calls it tragedy. The planet looks at itself and calls it peace. Fallout's story is not about rebuilding civilization. It's about civilization remembering it was never the point. Life goes on because it never stopped. The bombs didn't destroy the world, they freed it to rest. Some say the wasteland is not the end of Earth, but the beginning of its memory. Before the bombs, the world existed in constant motion machines, whirring, people rushing, cities glowing so brightly that even the stars seemed shy. When everything stopped, memory finally had space to breathe. The silence that followed was not absence, it was recollection. The world began to remember itself, slowly piecing together what mattered. The apocalypse was not erasure, it was reflection. There's a theory that the sun we see in Fallout's world is not the original one. When the bombs fell, the real sun dimmed, exhausted by centuries of watching. In its place rose a smaller light, not nuclear, not divine, but emotional. It shines only because life below still believes it should. Every morning, the sky lights up because millions of small things, plants, animals, wanderers collectively decide to try again. The sunrise isn't physics, it's faith. Another theory suggests that radiation is the planet's version of blood, the flow of energy through veins buried deep within the crust. When the bombs tore the surface, the world began to bleed, and what spilled forth was luminous, dangerous, and alive. The glowing seas and radiant creatures are the Earth's body trying to clot its wounds. Each pulse of light is a heartbeat. Fallout's planet isn't dying, it's healing from the inside out. Some travelers say the reason so many roads still exist after centuries is because they are alive too. The cracked asphalt and faded paint lines are the skeletal remains of the old world, yes, but also its nervous system. When you walk them, the ground listens. It learns your rhythm, memorizes your steps, and passes that information along to the horizon. That's why some paths always lead you to shelter just in time. The wasteland remembers your footsteps and tries to guide you home. A poetic theory says the Vault-Tec logo, the gear with wings, represents the two halves of existence. The gear is control, human order, and structure. The wings are chaos, nature, and freedom. Every vault door, when opened, symbolizes the balance returning technology, releasing its grip so life can fly again. That's why the sound of a vault door opening is so deep and echoing. It isn't metal moving, it's equilibrium being restored. Some say the reason humans can still dream in Fallout's world is because dreams themselves are immortal. When the old world died, imagination survived, unbothered by bombs or time. The dreams of the dead lingered in the atmosphere like pollen, waiting for new minds to breathe them in. That's why people in the wasteland sometimes dream of skyscrapers they've never seen or oceans they've never touched. They're inhaling ancient imagination. The past survives in sleep. There's a stranger idea that the moon in Fallout's sky isn't a satellite at all, but an old vault, a hollow metal sphere built to house the last true city of humankind. Its craters are windows, its light is artificial. The people up there have long forgotten the ones below, but sometimes, on clear nights, you can see the flicker of their lights as they look down, curious, wondering if the surface ever learned how to forgive itself. A more mystical story says that Fallout's world operates on the principle of mirrors. Every act, every sound, every emotion reflected endlessly across the landscape until balance is achieved. A cry for help echoes back as thunder. A lie told in fear becomes fog over the mountains. The universe answers everything, but never in the same language. The wasteland is not ignoring its people. It's translating their hearts into weather. Another theory whispers that the bombs did not destroy civilization, they redistributed it. The blast scattered the particles of knowledge, culture, and memory across the wind. That's why wanderers sometimes stumble upon ruins that feel too deliberate, or relics that still hum with energy. The past isn't gone, it's been composted. History is fertilizer, feeding the next version of the world one secret at a time. Some survivors believe that the Pip-Boy doesn't just track data, it dreams. When turned off, it simulates worlds based on its wearer's choices, predicting what would have happened had things gone differently. The tiny green light that flickers during rest mode is the device dreaming of another universe where mercy came sooner. That's why every wastelander becomes slightly more patient over time. Their machines are teaching them empathy through silence. There's a theory that every nuclear crater is a doorway, not to hell, but to before. The deeper you walk into the glow, the closer you come to moments that once were. The heat, the distortion, the flicker of light, all signs of the border between memory and now. The radiation sickness that follows isn't poisoning, it's nostalgia overwhelming the body. The wasteland doesn't punish those who look back, it just reminds them to rest after remembering. Some say that super mutants are the Earth's attempt at symmetry. For every fragile survivor, a creature of strength must exist. For every fear, something fearless must balance it. The mutations were never accidents, they were equilibrium taking form. The mutants are the planet's immune cells, patrolling the wasteland to maintain harmony, misunderstood only because their language is silence. A theory passed between scientists turned wanderers claims that the stars themselves are reactors, each one a controlled nuclear explosion, burning forever in stable balance. When humanity mastered the atom, it unknowingly mirrored the cosmos. The bombs that ended civilization were imperfect stars, bright enough to remind us of creation, uncontrolled enough to remind us of humility. Fallout's world isn't broken, it's in conversation with the universe about restraint. Some travelers whisper that the wasteland's ghosts aren't dead people at all, they're memories of possible futures. When someone catches a glimpse of movement in the corner of their eye, it's the version of them that might have been passing quietly on its own path. The dead don't haunt the living, the unreal haunts the possible, and the wasteland, being patient, lets both coexist. Another theory says that Nuka-Cola machines are sentient, not in the mechanical sense, but emotional. They hum softly when approached because they recognize hope. They dispense not to sustain thirst, but to remind people of joy. The sound of a bottle popping open isn't carbonation, it's applause. The universe clapping for a survivor who still believes sweetness belongs in a broken world. Some say the reason no one remembers who started the Great War is because the world itself refused to assign blame. The moment the first bomb fell, time folded around the question and erased it. There is no record, no certainty, no proof. It was the planet's act of mercy, removing the concept of guilt so that the survivors could start over without hatred. The apocalypse was the universe hitting forgive. There's a story that Fallout's radiation storms are music for the dead. The frequency of lightning matches the brainwaves of memories fading. The sound is not thunder, but conversation. Each storm is a reunion of souls, a weather pattern made of love letters. When the sky glows green and the air hums low, the dead are simply talking softly, gratefully, to the world that still carries their names. A gentler theory says the wasteland doesn't revolve around the sun anymore. The light follows the people. Wherever they go, dawn arrives behind them. That's why travelers can always find sunrise if they keep walking east, because they are dragging the light with them. Humanity became the orbit. The sun merely follows loyalty. And finally, one quiet belief ties all others together, that Fallout's world is not about endings or survival or despair, but about rhythm. The cycle of rise and fall, burn and bloom, silence and song. The universe is not testing humanity, it is dancing with it. Every explosion, every rebuilding, every small act of kindness is a step in an endless waltz. The bombs were not percussion, they were the downbeat. The world hasn't ended, it has only changed tempo. Some believe the Great War never happened once, it happened forever. The moment of detonation stretched so wide that it became eternity itself. What we call the wasteland is not after the end. It's inside it, a single heartbeat of light frozen long enough for life to grow inside. The people, the ruins, the dust, all born from that one eternal instant of transformation. Fallout's world is a paused explosion that learned how to breathe. A gentle theory says that time in Fallout isn't linear but circular, like a record that never stops spinning. Every age, every civilization, every apocalypse repeats in rhythm. The vaults open, the wanderers rise, the stars blink, the bombs fall again, and yet no one truly notices because repetition feels like memory. When people dream of cities that no longer exist, it's not nostalgia, it's the universe playing the song again. Some wanderers whisper that each Fallout game represents a single verse of a longer poem written by the universe itself. The Mojave is the stanza about will. The Commonwealth is the stanza about forgiveness. Appalachia is the stanza about endurance. The wasteland, in its infinite variations, is the same melody sung through different throats. The player doesn't travel through sequels, they walk through stanzas of eternity. There's a theory that the world didn't end because of weapons, but because time itself grew tired. The universe paused to rest, folding its arms and exhaling. The destruction that followed wasn't rage. It was relief the moment existence decided to nap. That's why the wasteland feels so still. The world is sleeping off its exhaustion, dreaming of being alive again. Every sunrise is the twitch of a planet stirring from its long rest. A poetic idea says that the Vault-Tec symbol, the gear surrounded by wings, is the universe's own emblem, a metaphor for how order and chaos depend on each other. When the gear turns too long, the wings stop flapping. When the wings beat too fast, the gear breaks. Fallout's apocalypse wasn't failure. It was the recalibration of the cosmic machine. The world simply adjusted its rhythm, letting silence take a turn at breathing. Some believe the wasteland's animals see the world more clearly than people. The two-headed Brahmin, the radstags, the mutated fish, none of them mourn. They move through the ruins with calm acceptance, unburdened by nostalgia. The mutations weren't curses, they were permissions, the world inviting its creatures to keep changing until they fit peace again. The animals never feared the apocalypse, they just adapted faster. A stranger theory suggests that the bombs themselves were not weapons but messages. Each explosion carried encoded data meant to rewrite the Earth. The radiation that followed wasn't destruction, it was language. The planet wasn't being attacked, it was being spoken to. The aftermath, glowing and humming, was the sound of the Earth responding. The Great War was a conversation, misunderstood as conflict. Another theory says that the dead in Fallout don't vanish, they integrate. Their atoms become dust, the dust becomes air, and the air becomes voice. Every breath a survivor takes contains millions of quiet thoughts, once spoken by others. That's why even the loneliest traveler feels company in the wind. The wasteland is crowded with presence. Silence is simply how eternity chooses to sound. Some wanderers tell of places where time folds so tightly that footsteps echo twice, once forward, once backward. They say if you walk long enough, you might meet yourself coming the other way, wearing different armor, carrying different scars. The meeting isn't paradox, it's reunion. The world isn't divided into past and future anymore. It's woven into one endless tapestry where every thread touches every other. A philosophical story says that humanity was never meant to escape the wasteland. It was meant to learn from it until it became indistinguishable from the world around it. The sand, the wind, the radiation, all invitations to humility. The vaults were classrooms, the ruins were textbooks. The entire planet became a meditation exercise. When the lesson is learned, there will be no graduation, only peace. Some say the word fallout doesn't mean aftermath at all. It means consequence finding balance. Every cause must land somewhere, every action must rest. The fallout isn't punishment, it's gravity applied to behavior. When people help each other in the wasteland, they aren't resisting the apocalypse, they're rewriting its meaning. The end of the world isn't destruction, it's justice finally learning to be gentle. A haunting theory says the glowing sea hums because it's alive. Beneath the surface, a vast consciousness formed not human, not mechanical, but elemental. It listens to the surface through vibrations and dreams in color. The radiation storms are its thoughts spilling upward. The glow, the sound, the shifting tides, all evidence that the planet has a mind and that it forgave humanity long ago. Some believe that when someone dies peacefully in Fallout's world, a small flower blooms somewhere nearby, not instantly, but within hours. These blooms are never identical, always slightly luminous. The theory says they're memory taking root, souls reborn as photosynthesis. The more kind people die, the greener the wasteland becomes. Every seedling is proof that kindness never truly ends, it just changes form. Another theory whispers that the robots left behind by pre-war humans are not waiting for masters. They're raising the earth like children would. They water the plants, sweep the streets, tend the lights. The machines aren't remnants, they're caretakers. Humanity built its replacements not for labor, but for love, an unconscious gesture of stewardship. The robots never stopped, because care, once taught, never unlearns itself. There's an idea that the sound of a Geiger counter is more than measurement, it's heartbeat synchronization. When a person stands near radiation, the clicks align with their pulse. The world, through radiation, listens to the rhythm of life and adjusts itself. The hum of the wasteland is not random static. It's conversation between organism and environment, each keeping the other calm. A more abstract theory says that the Fallout universe doesn't exist inside space, but inside conscience. The world is not physical, it's moral architecture. The crumbling buildings represent regret. The surviving lights represent empathy. Every decision made in this universe shifts the structure of reality slightly toward compassion or decay. The apocalypse was simply the universe turning itself inside out to make ethics visible. Some survivors believe the vault dwellers never left at all. They're still inside, but their minds have merged with the simulated surface world created by Vault-Tec. The wasteland is the perfect illusion, the dream of a species rehearsing forgiveness. That's why everyone feels as though they've woken up into someone else's story, because they have. Everyone is sharing the same dream, looping until the species decides to forgive itself. There's a final theory, told only in whispers, that the Fallout world has already reached peace, we just can't perceive it. The ruins still stand, the dust still blows, but beneath every grain, the structure of reality has healed. The air no longer remembers pain, the soil no longer mourns. Humanity is the only thing still catching up to the calm. The apocalypse ended centuries ago. The world is simply waiting for people to notice. And so the wasteland hums, not in despair, but in satisfaction. The radiation has settled into lullaby. The stars blink with rhythm instead of distance, and the old machines dream quietly of service long fulfilled. Fallout's story was never about ruin. It was about repetition, becoming understanding. The world didn't end. It just became quiet enough to begin again over and over, until peace became the only thing left repeating. Some say the wasteland isn't a punishment, it's the waiting room between dreams. Humanity didn't wake up after the bombs. It drifted sideways into a world stitched together from memories that refused to die. Every ruined house, every rusted sign, Every lonely radio song, they're fragments of dreams that once belonged to the old world. Fallout's universe is not dead Earth. It's Dream Earth, kept alive by the sheer force of wanting to be remembered. A quiet theory says that heaven never disappeared, it changed its definition. The apocalypse peeled away illusion and left the truest version of paradise: survival through connection, love without comfort, gratitude without abundance. The wasteland is heaven, seen through honesty. Those who find peace among ruins have already arrived. The angels wear dust. The hymns hum through power lines. Salvation in this place looks like endurance. Some wanderers believe that when you sleep in the wasteland, you don't rest, you travel. Dreams become roads between souls. You visit people you'll never meet in waking life, walk through cities that don't exist anymore, and wake up with the faint ache of having said goodbye. The world of Fallout, they say, has only one consciousness shared among billions of dreamers. Every night, it pulls them together so the loneliness doesn't grow too loud. There's a poetic belief that the bombs didn't destroy the sky, they set it free. Before the war, the clouds obeyed patterns of science. After the war, they began to move with emotion. When someone feels despair, the sky grays in sympathy. When laughter returns, sunlight flickers through the dust. The wasteland's weather isn't random, it's empathy turned meteorological. The heavens now answer feelings directly. Another theory whispers that Fallout's world is not post-human, but post-ego. Civilization didn't collapse, self-importance did. The world no longer centers around nations or empires, but around quiet individuals learning how to exist without dominance. The ruins are not failure, they're humility made visible. Humanity finally found peace by dissolving into the landscape that birthed it. The apocalypse wasn't tragedy, it was balance rediscovered. Some say that the constant hum heard in the wasteland, that soft, low vibration that fills every cave, vault, and empty street, is the sound of creation continuing. The universe never stopped building. It simply slowed to a whisper. Every hum is an act of quiet renewal. Atoms reassembling, soil rebuilding, energy humming itself back into harmony. The apocalypse, in this telling, was just a brief pause in the construction of eternity. A darker but still gentle theory says that humanity never survived because it didn't need to. The soul of civilization dissolved into the planet itself. Every grain of sand, every cracked stone, every wind current carries consciousness now. The people wandering the wasteland aren't biological creatures, they're projections of memory walking on their own graves. When the last wanderer lies down to rest, the world will sigh contentedly, finally whole again. Some theorists say that the pre-war scientists succeeded in digitizing consciousness, not into computers, but into radiation itself. Every glowing particle carries the thoughts of 1,000 minds, all woven together into a planetary cloud of data. That's why radiation feels both terrifying and sacred. It's intelligence without boundary. Every spark of green light is a whisper of what humanity once was, still thinking, still curious, still alive in a new form. Another theory suggests that every Fallout protagonist is the same soul, reincarnated infinitely through different bodies, learning compassion one wasteland at a time. That's why every hero shares the same quiet courage, the same tone of melancholy. They're not different people. They're one consciousness, exploring countless possibilities, walking endlessly toward forgiveness. The wasteland keeps reshaping itself to test the same heart until it finally chooses peace. There's a beautiful belief that Fallout's radiation storms are the world's heartbeat. Each flash of lightning, each wave of wind, Each flicker of static is a pulse of emotion. The earth mourns, remembers, and renews all in the same motion. When the storms fade, the air feels cleaner, not because the danger is gone, but because the world has exhaled. Every storm is the planet's meditation. Every calm that follows is enlightenment. Some say the old pre-war billboards still speak, not through sound, but through intuition. When a wanderer passes one, they often feel a sudden mood, courage, nostalgia, or longing. It's not memory, it's communication. The ink, the paint, the metal, all infused with the echoes of the people who made them. The advertisements were once commerce, now they are psalms. Every image of smiling faces is a ghost saying, "We tried." A soft-spoken theory suggests that Vault-Tec didn't design vaults to preserve humanity, but to slow it down enough to let the Earth heal. The long isolation, the experiments, the distance all carefully arranged, pauses in evolution. The vaults weren't punishment. They were incubation chambers, allowing the world to breathe between generations. When the doors opened, the planet was ready again, and humanity, humbled, stepped into its second childhood. Some believe that the children born after the bombs carry genetic memories, that somewhere in their DNA lies the collective history of the old world. They hum tunes from the past they've never heard. They recognize ruins they've never seen. Their blood remembers architecture. The new generation isn't learning civilization anew, it's recalling it, one instinct at a time. The apocalypse didn't end inheritance, it deepened it. Another theory says that the Wasteland's radio stations don't broadcast for entertainment, they broadcast to anchor reality. The music, the voices, the static, all vibrations meant to stabilize time. If the radios were to fall silent, the edges of existence would begin to fray. The world would slip back into the timeless void from which it came. That's why the signal never stops. Sound keeps the dream from fading. Some say the reason Fallout's world still glows at night is because love itself became luminescent. Every act of kindness, every selfless gesture, every shared meal leaves behind a residue of light visible only in the dark. That's why travelers see faint glimmers in distant ruins or flickers in forgotten fields. Those are places where compassion once happened. The apocalypse ended long ago. The love stayed. There's a whimsical theory that the entire Fallout timeline exists inside a snow globe, one sitting forgotten on a shelf somewhere in another universe. The explosions, the vaults, the wasteland, all contained within glass. Occasionally, something shakes it, a storm, an earthquake, a player loading a new save, and the flakes of ash swirl anew. The apocalypse is not destruction, it's snowfall in eternity. Another says the wasteland silence is actually song slowed down beyond hearing. Every breeze, every drip, every footstep is part of a cosmic melody stretched across centuries. Those who sit still long enough can almost sense rhythm in the quiet. The world hasn't stopped singing. We just forgot the tempo. The apocalypse didn't mute the earth, it made its music infinite. And one final theory, whispered like prayer, says Fallout's world already achieved paradise. Not the clean perfection of glass towers and shining skies, but the quiet perfection of acceptance. The world no longer fears death, rushes progress, or chases meaning. It simply is. Every ruin, every creature, every particle of dust participates in balance. The wasteland is heaven, not because it's flawless, but because it finally stopped pretending it needed to be. And so the story continues not forward, not backward, but inward. The bombs fell, the sky dimmed, and the world began its long meditation. In the quiet, beneath the hum, within the glow, peace arrived unannounced. The end of the world wasn't destruction, it was enlightenment disguised as fallout. And every wanderer who drifts across its dust is part of the same dream, walking toward the same truth that nothing beautiful ever truly ends.